Chapter 63. Enlightenment and Awakening Theories. Question. Robert, you present a lot of reasons why we cannot make a legitimate claim to absolute truth. But the thing is, students of philosophy have known for a long time that we cannot successfully investigate metaphysical issues. And you offer good reasons why it's best not to glom onto theories and such as being absolutely true, or practices as being uniformly safe and effective. But nothing you have said so far seems to prevent people from having their own favorite theories that they can't prove, but which they find very compelling. Answer. Right. Many people love conjecture, pet beliefs, and certainties, and live in a world of their own prized opinions, regardless of facts. Due to normal human cognitive biases, the confirmation bias, for example, in which information tending to support what one already believes is overvalued, while that which might cast doubt on one's beliefs will be discounted or even forgotten entirely, a conjecture that meets emotional needs may quickly become a pet belief, and then a certainty, regardless of facticity. Nothing I have said will forestall that, but there is a condition of human being in which one lives without conjectures and pet theories about metaphysical matters, and without needing any. That condition, which is an aspect of what I am calling awake, is the point of view embodied in the 10,000 things. Some people say that a supreme being created the universe and everything in it. That is the theory. But since that conjecture can neither be proved nor falsified, but only believed or disbelieved, I have no interest in it. It fails entirely to engage me. And by the way, the supreme being conjecture does not deserve the name theory. A conjecture or hypothesis can only rise to the stature of a theory if there are good ways in which it can be falsified, and after some of those ways of refutation have been tried and failed, which is not the case with religious dogma, and never can be, as you pointed out. To be perfectly clear on this point, a theory is not a guess or a belief, but an idea that has already stood up to investigation. The more it is investigated and continues to stand up, the more robust, as this is said, the theory is considered. If at some point the theory fails to stand up to investigation, then it is discarded. In that use of the word theory, which is the proper use when speaking philosophically, supreme being or source is not actually a theory at all, but rather speculation, conjecture, or article of faith. However, if someone has a use for religious belief in the so-called supreme being, perhaps, for example, it takes the sting out of the idea of death, or provides a rationale for acting morally, fine by me. I am not proselytizing, but only saying how I personally see these matters. Question. As a long-time critic of Enlightenment and awakening theories, it seems to me that you would have some thoughts on which of the theories you have heard seem to hold water, or at least hold the promise of holding water. Answer. I'm not sure what you mean by Enlightenment and awakening theories. If you specify, I will try to respond. Question. Also, your approach generally would seem to me to discourage others from putting forth ideas that they think would hold water. Answer. It's not my intention to discourage anyone from anything. If you have ideas like that, please feel free to share them. Put forth whatever you like. My words and photographs are purely an expression of my own mind, with no further agenda or ulterior motive. That is why I say that I am not a spiritual teacher. I share my point of view as a form of philosophical self-expression, not very different from the self-expression conveyed by my photographs. The sharing of my perspective is not intended to teach anyone anything about reality, or discourage anyone from beliefs that seem important to them. It is a frank report of how I see life and mind, not some dogma I am trying to foist off on anyone. I speak only for myself and just say what I see. Take it for what it's worth, or reject it out of hand. That's not up to me. Nevertheless, some people are annoyed by my point of view and are moved to blame me for having my outlook and not the one they have. After I was quoted as saying that reincarnation is not a fact, but a belief based on hearsay and fear of death, and that words like destiny or karma do not explain anything, someone commented that my view of reincarnation was a stupid man's cop-out, and went on to assert that denying reincarnation is similar to denying climate change, and more dangerous. Really? That is a perfect example of the confirmation bias in action. The writer of those words elevated his belief in reincarnation to the status of a scientific fact by bracketing it with real scientific observations about greenhouse gases and climate, while at the same time demeaning an idea that conflicted with his pet belief, now elevated to a certainty, by calling me stupid, and my refusal to accept reincarnation as a fact dangerous. Question. Also, as a therapist tasked with helping others find health, peace, or healing, you must be working from some tentative theories about the nature of the mind. Otherwise, you would spend your entire career advising people about the folly of putting faith in just about anything. Answer. I do think faith is a kind of folly, but I would not necessarily have said that to a therapy client. Psychotherapy is a specialized arena for emotional healing within artificially constructed boundaries, not the place for devil-may-care metaphysics or philosophy. One assumes that the client is wounded and hurting, otherwise he or she would not be in the consultorio in the first place, and needs care and attention, not necessarily unadorned blunt truth-telling, although that might figure in at the appropriate moment. However, when people ask questions about awakening or non-duality, which is what arises in this milieu of public discourse, my answers are not therapy and make no claim to be. All I can offer in this forum, which has nothing to do with psychotherapy, is unvarnished, entirely candid replies. The more forthright, the better. To do otherwise would be to disrespect the questions. Question. Do you at any point go beyond criticism to suggest positive guidance? Answer. If you are still speaking about psychotherapy, yes, guidance may be part of that. My work was more psychoanalysis than guidance, usually leaving practical matters to the discretion of the client. But I did some counseling and couples work too, where advice figured in. I have, for example, said to more than one client, "It seems to me that you are being abused in this relationship. Perhaps you should consider changing the arrangements." One outcome of giving that kind of advice was a phone call from an irate husband, a gangster known to have killed personally at least 2 people, threatening to kill me. Fortunately for me, my client was ready to leave him and had a friend with whom I could collude to get her and her daughter away from her bodyguard and on a plane out of the country. The wife-beating husband had been wanting to muzzle me while she was still my patient, but it wasn't vengeance he was after. Once she was gone, I became a person of little interest. He knew she was never coming back. But if you are speaking about awakening, the best positive guidance I have to offer is to start from scratch. To the extent possible, let go of attachment to previous beliefs and childhood indoctrination. Stop focusing on what others believe. Leave off identifying as a member of a so-called race, gender, nationality, school of thought, religion, tribe, or anything else. Then deal with this moment as freshly as you can. You seem to imagine that suggestion as negative. I don't see it that way, although it is related to the so-called via negativa, the traditional process of neti-neti. If someone actually wants to awaken, many more say they do than actually mean it. That begins, in my experience, not by learning and acquiring, but by discarding and becoming naked, alone, unprotected, uncertain, and open. The word negative has in general speech a negative connotation. Being positive seems strong and can-do. Compared to that, negative seems weak and downbeat. But weak and downbeat is not the connotation of the term via negativa. Here, it does not mean weaker or lesser, not at all. It means open-minded, not always looking to glom onto explanations, willing to assess ideas skeptically without smearing a bunch of power and respect on them like maple syrup on a pancake. This is a negativity akin to the negative space of the empty chair in a Gestalt therapy session that will be one's interlocutor in a round of straight talk, without evasions and justifications. This is the emptiness we find within our own minds if we have such luck, an emptiness willing to be filled, but only with the finest understanding available in each moment, not second-hand tropes or self-help truisms. On the via negativa, there are no believers, no disciples, no one kissing Muji's feet, no one whipping up poor old Ramana Maharshi, now buried under a slab of concrete, into a myth that will feed many mouths. It's so easy and pointless to speak for him now that he is dead and cannot debunk a word of it. On the via negativa, everything is out in the open. Each of us has our own fish to fry. The heart is a lonely hunter, as Carson McCullers put it, and the greeting when we meet is, "Walk on." Question: if you absolutely had to pick one of the available spiritual schools of thought, which one would it be? Or would you recommend sticking to extreme Socratic doubt for everyone in all circumstances, including yourself? Answer: Wowee, you are relentless. Personally, I no longer require the potent medicine of Socratic doubt. Since I am free of beliefs, nothing needs doubting. But certainly I can recommend that you try that medicine. It might help to cure the delusion that Robert or any other human primate animal has answers to ultimate questions. That said, a little Taoism never hurt anyone, and Stoicism has a lot going for it as well. Question: given that people are going to continue searching, sometimes randomly, for guidance in their beliefs and practices, and to continue trying various things, do you feel at all obliged to offer some positive guidance? Answer: the only obligation I feel on this page is candor. Question: earlier you said, quote, "I'm not sure what you mean by Enlightenment and awakening theories. If you specify, I will try to respond," unquote. I dodged the question then because I did not trust you to hear my answer fairly. Now I do, so let me try to specify. Up until a couple of years ago, I had considered myself a garden-variety spiritual aspirant in pursuit of enlightenment, the kind of spiritual enlightenment that emerged in the 1960s. Then, a couple of short years ago, several things happened at once. I experienced a spontaneous and completely unbidden Kundalini arousal, which knocked me on my butt for a period of months. Also, I began to experience what I understand is referred to as celestial perception, the perception of celestial or transdimensional or noumenal beings. I was in no way ready for these things. I did not embrace them or make assumptions about them. They just happened. And I'm not going to talk about that here for fear of inviting comments I don't want to deal with. The word enlightenment quickly fell by the wayside for me. It just didn't seem to refer to what had happened to me, and I quickly concluded that the term was at best outdated and at worst completely bogus. I began reading stuff and watching videos, and found that the word awakening had come into vogue. However, the people using that word made it clear that there was no official definition for it, and lots of people defined it in lots of different ways, some of which seemed relevant to what was happening to me, some not. Frankly, it didn't seem to have any really useful definition. And although, as I said, a lot of the stuff that was happening to me seemed to fit under the awakening umbrella, there was a lot of other stuff going on that didn't seem to fit anywhere. So by the time I encountered your work, Robert, there was a lot of stuff going on for which there was no language, and about which there is not a lot of intelligent discussion. There are many in the broad and increasingly inclusive and varied meditation community willing to discuss at least some of these phenomena. But basically, I was at sea, forging my own personal approach to spirituality or religiosity, obviously fitting nowhere and no longer sure who my allies in the traditional meditation community might be. I found your work attractive because I was reacting against the spiritual establishment, the meditation community broadly defined, and you seem to be a staunch critic of both. I think there are a lot of us out here experiencing all kinds of stuff for which there's no name and no catch-all, no umbrella term. In a way, that relates to your work, Robert. You seem to me to be critiquing a school of thought that is now kind of outdated. The reality has moved on, so your critique seems outdated also. No offense. Meanwhile, nobody is addressing the new emergent reality, the reality of people like myself whose experience is totally effing anomalous, and who cannot readily find anyone ready or willing to discuss it, and to whom the meditation culture seems wholly outdated, irrelevant, and archaic. The only thing I feel I can bring to the table are anecdotes that you have clearly signaled wouldn't hold up for you. So I understand that God is an unprovable theory or something like that, but a good defensible theory comes in very handy. I think most of us understand the limits of theories, but it would be nice to have a provisional explanation or two that in the midst of a lot of unusual phenomena we can adopt at least temporarily until something better comes along. Answer: No, God is not an unprovable theory. It is not a theory at all. And the proper approach to an actual theory is not to defend it, but to question it by testing it against real-world conditions. To the extent that it resists attacks, the theory becomes more useful. Please try to be clear on that. Now, with all due respect, you are asking me for something that I cannot give you, and no one else can either, in my view. I have no explanation, provisional or otherwise, for your experiences. Anyone who claims to have one is, in my view, either a liar or self-deluded. Nor do I have any idea really of what you mean by noumenal beings, unless you mean hallucinations, which I do not think is what you intend when you say that. And ditto for Kundalini arousal. I have no idea what that term means. I am not feigning ignorance. I have heard the word Kundalini used countless times, but naming something does not indicate that it really exists. So far as I know, no one has demonstrated the existence of any Kundalini. I am not saying it doesn't exist. I am pointing out that the only evidence for it is hearsay and subjectivity, which are not actually evidence at all. People see all kinds of things and have all kinds of experiences that may be interesting, compelling, enjoyable, or frightening, but experiences take place in the brain, or if brain sounds too materialistic to your ear, experiences take place in mind, not outside somewhere. If we are honest, we do not even know if a tree we can walk up to and touch really exists, much less any trans-dimensional beings. There is an assumption in your question that is simply incorrect. The term awakening has not come into vogue. It is an ancient usage. For example, in Zen, the word satori means a sudden awakening, such as occurred in my case, and that usage goes back more than a millennium. I avoid the word enlightenment only because, like the word God, it is so overused now that no one knows what it means, and so it has become a screen onto which people project their spiritual fantasies. One must have some kind of word, I suppose, so I prefer the word awake. When I am with other people whom I see as awake, the few I know, we recognize one another easily, and if we speak of these matters, it has little or nothing to do with any special experiences, but with a kind of sane worldview. No confusion there at all, nor any need to explain anything. It's as if the commonplace egoic view is present, only as a kind of amusing guest. No arguments, no contention, no defending, no debate, none of that. Any conversation is coming from a different place entirely, and often a lot of smiling takes place. The confusion about being awake in the present resides in the minds of people who seek to awaken, which many imagine is a state marked by all kinds of phenomena, like the ones you describe. But visions of trans-dimensional beings and all of that have nothing to do with what I mean by awake. Nothing. If I started seeing a lot of that stuff, I might consider a neurological exam. No doubt, people experience all kinds of stuff, but I do not think you should assume that such happenings are something new, as you said. Nor should you assume that those experiences have anything to do with awakening. I am not saying they don't. I am saying that you should not jump to that conclusion. But you already have, I see. You said that I seem to be, quote, critiquing a school of thought that is now kind of outdated. The reality has moved on, so your critique seems outdated also, unquote. What school of thought is that exactly, and what reality has moved on from it? Please clear that up. By the way, I was not offended in the least. Here you are free to speak from the heart, without consideration of the impact of your words on Robert. All I ask is basic civility, and I do not ask that to avoid being offended. I won't be, but because name-calling and rudeness obscure communication. Frankly, I do not see any new emergent reality. I see the same old thing being repeated endlessly, the same old wine in different bottles. Human beings in a trance state trying to explain the inexplicable with religion and spirituality. Why? Because they are afraid to experience this aliveness, a total and complete mystery, without explanations, or if not afraid, dissatisfied by it. You will never know what any of this really means, I say. You will never know the ultimate source of anything. The very trying to find out is part of the trance, a way of remaining in the trance, a way of not being awake. Consider this, please. What if, instead of the foregoing, I had replied this way? Great question. Yes, early in my meditation practice, which involved 10 hours a day staring at the wall, I broke through. I had a massive Kundalini arousal, and then a voice, it could have been an angel, spoke to me, telling me, Robert, your true nature is divine, and you were born to lead others to the knowledge that the noumenal beings that appear when you raise your Kundalini must be honored as avatars of the unity of all life in the universe. And the phenomena that are causing you this anxiety are not hallucinations at all, but more real than the nose on your face. They are beings from another realm, advanced beyond our world, who see you as an awakening spirit and want to open channels of communication with you if you will only let them. You must never doubt this, because it is only your doubt that keeps you from knowing God. What would that do for you? Would that make everything just dandy? No insult intended. That is a serious question. Question. I understood and related to the first part of your response better than the second part. The thing is, I made no assumptions, and I still make no assumptions about what happened. I only used the words I used because I wanted to be understood, not to be believed. Nor was I looking for a particular response of any kind. The second part of your response seems to imply assumptions about my possible response to events, or the response that I expected, that are inaccurate. I do not think I am awake. In fact, I'm pretty sure I'm not. And with all I've seen and heard, I do not want to be awake in the sense you mentioned. Nor do I think that I'm being tapped by some invisible agents or agency for some special purpose. I honestly do not know what is going on, and I honestly do not care. Also, I never imagined the kind of response you posit in the second part of your response, and I can't relate to it. In reality, I have withheld judgment on all of these things since it all started, and I'm still doing so. It's just too confusing. What you did do was illustrate why I don't like to talk about this stuff. Also, with respect to the use of the term awake, I was out of touch with this sort of discussion for many, many years. When I initially lost touch with it, awakened was not used in the sense one hears it today. When I started watching videos to see what was going on, everybody was using awakened all the time, in all kinds of different ways. Enlightenment appeared to have disappeared from the dictionary. For the record, I have a doctorate in modern European history and had the empirical method drummed into me, so I understand about evidence and proof and such. I always knew I was on very uncertain ground empirically, and I understood exactly why. As for Kundalini, I can only say that it seems quite real to me. I stopped meditating to avoid any further encounters with it, and when once in a while I go back to meditating to see if I can do it anymore, I experience these things I associate with Kundalini, so I always stop again. For what it's worth, I do not want anything to do with awakening or with Kundalini, and I am careful to avoid these things. I just find my life full of phenomena that I did not seek, do not indulge or enjoy, and try to avoid. And my tentative efforts to discuss them here hasn't changed my resolve. Answer: Thanks. Now I get it. The last part of my reply was a kind of joke meant to illustrate that explanations are useless. I did not intend the joke to be at your expense. As for Kundalini, do you really imagine a serpent coiled up at the base of your spine that sends energy up the spinal column when you meditate, causing visions when that energy reaches the crown chakra in your head? Frankly, I don't. I see visions such as you describe as what happens when attention is turned inward. I see plenty of visions when my attention is removed from the outside world, at night, for example, when asleep and dreaming, and I can see them at times just by closing my eyes. I just do not assume that they are beings. To me, it's all mind. I don't ask you to agree. I sense that you are a bit frightened by what you have seen, so probably suspending those practices is a good idea. Please be assured that I've taken everything you said seriously. I just have a strange sense of humor. Question: I don't think of Kundalini in those terms. I can only attest that when I meditate, even for small periods of time, I experience strong surges of energy from the base of my spine. It doesn't look like a serpent, although whenever I have watched it, the surge of energy does have a certain sinuous quality to it. On one notable occasion, such a surge, an especially strong one, triggered months of anxiety and hypertension. This experience and the symptoms that resulted sounded a lot like what other people described when I went looking to find out. It took me months to calm down. That was a couple of years ago. A similar thing happened during a workshop I attended this winter. The workshop was being conducted by the son of a close friend, hence my attendance. The workshop experience was complicated. I'm still coming back from that one. I think the important thing to say here is that I do not seek these things out. I don't enjoy them when they happen, and now I studiously avoid situations that might cause these things to repeat. I think I started having these experiences because I meditated more or less regularly for 4 or 5 decades, never thinking these things would happen to me. Now I realize that I was being naive and foolish, and I regret my past actions. I really badly disturbed my inner peace with all that meditation, and I want it back. By the way, I'm not big on inner or outer visions, and I don't recall my dreams very often. I do see some subtle phenomena, and I can tell you that they don't seem imaginary. It seems like I am seeing something going on subtle levels. This might sound paradoxical or even contradictory, but I don't go looking for this stuff. I get a kick out of it when it happens, and other people usually enjoy the tale, but I don't seek this stuff out. And if it doesn't happen for a long time, I don't miss it. I might wonder about it, but I don't miss it. Something about the way I lived my life caused this stuff. All those years of meditation, I figure. Answer: Aha. Yes, I've heard things like this from others, and often with the regret you seem to feel. I do wish you well, my friend. Question. Thanks, Robert. For what it's worth, after several months of what I think of as recovery time, I am feeling a lot better. The symptoms have largely subsided. What I used to think of as normal seems to be returning. I will continue reading your book. I am planning to avoid meditation practices, etc. They all seem kind of hokey and risky to me, and I might once in a while talk to people about what I think are the dangers of meditation, although nobody seems to appreciate my efforts in that direction. After all of the above, I am not bereft of what I might very cautiously refer to as the comforts of spirit. It feels like I am developing a healthy spirituality, or whatever the heck one can safely call it. Going forward, I will treat this whole category of phenomena with the caution and respect I now realize it is due, and humbly suggest that others do the same. I think it is courageous and generous of you to put yourself out there as a critic of meditation culture. Somebody needs to be out there doing it. Thank you. Answer. You are most welcome. As I said, I wish you well.